Hello, good evening everyone.
Hi.
Welcome, Anne-Marie.
Thank you.
Is there anything that Luke left out?
Nope.
No? Okay, all right. So before we get started, a couple of questions. First of all, one for the audience, just so that we can sort of calibrate the talk a little bit more. Who in here is an entrepreneur? Great, that's roughly 2/3. And who in here has been before to an FP Live? Okay, cool. So lots of new people. Welcome, everyone. And now back to Anne-Marie. Some quick fire questions before we talk about Just Giving and entrepreneurship. Kindle or paperbacks?
Back to paperback.
Good. What's the best thing that you've done this year?
Rest after the deal.
Yeah, good. Mountains, beach, or city break?
Mountains.
I like these answers, they're good. If you were Prime Minister for a day, what would you do?
Reset Brexit. Cancel it, sorry, cancel.
Yeah, a classic Old Street answer. And Star Trek or Star Wars?
Neither.
It's a shame Star Wars is the correct answer. Right, okay, so let's talk about entrepreneurship, shall we? It's probably quite a good idea for everyone to hear about the story pre-Just Giving, actually. So you just spent the best part of 2 decades with Just Giving, building a phenomenal amount of value, delivering an extraordinary amount of value to lots of different stakeholders in various different, hundreds of thousands of different fundraisings, probably millions of fundraisings around the world. But that all started at a point, and there's a backstory to that. So maybe if you could just share with the audience some stories and tales of your time at Médecins Sans Frontières, and perhaps even before that, and what led you to setting up the company.
Sure. When I met Zareen, I mean, the previous gentleman said I was the founder of Just Giving. I'm very much the co-founder of Just Giving because my partner in the business is Zareen Karras, and I think without her, definitely, Just Giving wouldn't be. She had the original idea, and then we met, and then the rest is history. But it's very much a sort of team enterprise. So the way Just Giving came about is that, she and I had never met before, but we were thinking about the same problem from 2 different angles. I was at Médecins Sans Frontières, as Matt has said, and in the really sort of happy position of being in charge of the British arm of an organization that had just won probably the most prestigious thing you can think of, which is the Nobel Peace Prize. So in '99, out of the blue, we got a call, and we had received this extraordinary accolade, completely deserved if you know a little bit about the work. But I'm not a medic. I'm not somebody who is or who was on the front line of the work. I was primarily the sort of, on the commercial side, if you like, ensuring that we had the resources to function. It was wonderful to receive that accolade, but at the same time, it raised a big professional crisis because we were inundated with generosity and money. And so if you were in charge of fundraising, it sort of spoiled your game a bit. But also it created a big question. So from November onwards, all our web properties at Médecins Sans Frontières were inundated with traffic, which we couldn't monetize. So, I thought naively there must be an app that would enable the charity to just receive money online, receive donations. There had never been as much goodwill for the brand as that moment, and I thought, surely this app exists. And I was stunned to discover that it didn't, and it really drove me mad because I could see all the traffic everywhere, and we couldn't basically monetize that traffic. At the same time as we were sort of wrestling with that, talking to the bank, realizing it was risky and complicated, etc., Zareen, on the other side of town in London, was believed she could raise some seed money to begin to chip away at this question. How could we create a platform that would make giving more frictionless and more rewarding for donors. And in short, really to connect, to create a bit of a marketplace. And I think it's fair to say, I mean, I've learned a lot about the giving market ever since, but I think it's really, with hindsight, a really profound insight to think of giving as a marketplace then in 99 when she had the idea. And it was not just about, her ambition was not just to make giving more efficient. I mean, there were SaaS, they weren't called SaaS platforms at the time, but there were vendors who were helping charities save money in raising money. But her ambition was, having looked at eBay and other amazing marketplaces out there, that surely if we thought of giving as a marketplace, we could create an intelligence that would do a better job at matching people with an interest and a passion for a cause, and the causes, the charities primarily, that need their money. And because her insight, which is very evident as most profound insights are, that unlike other forms of expenditure, nobody really wakes up in the morning burning to give in the absolute. You have to be asked. So we needed to, if we were to grow giving and not just make its processing more efficient, we needed to create something that would be more intelligent at matching people with a passion, with a cause. So anyway, we were introduced, and I convinced her that, well, first I thought it was a brilliant idea. I stopped thinking about my day job, so I decided to quit it and to sort of join forces with her. And
Zareen at this time was where? She was
she had come out of a city career. She was an investment banker and a lawyer in her past experience, and she was in between things. So she was responsible. She kind of unlocked our seed funding, and that enabled us to, well, sort of start working together and create a small team.
So did you know Zareen from before that point, or
no?
Okay,
no.
Wow. So it came in at Colin, and so how did you get introduced? How did the relationship start?
So sometimes you really have to be grateful for some key individuals have been guiding your hand without you realizing it. In those of you who might know about the for good space might remember a guy called Stephen Lloyd, who is a bit of a legend in the sort of for purpose world or NGO world. He was a lawyer who was an extraordinary advisor and friend to many people in the sort of social change world. And he advised Zareen, and Zareen was introduced to him because he was impossible to avoid. And he was our attorney at MSF. And it was really insightful of him to say to her, look, you really need to meet Anne-Marie, you'll get on really well. And he was an amazing judge of character. I mean, we're chalk and cheese, Zareen and I, in every way. But he was absolutely right that, Well, I mean, in every conceivable way, she's very, very, very rational. Properly educated, whereas I'm less so. She had a city career. As kosher as they come, and I come from a activism world and brought up by communists. I mean, we're just not. We're not meant to meet. but we became friends. I think one of the 18 years on, we are each other's best friend. I think I can speak for her in saying that as well. But I'm pretty sure that our professional relationship would not have worked in the same way if we had been friends as we entered this journey. We really learned to know each other and appreciate, our different approaches on the job.
Okay, so you got introduced to Zareen, and she had the makings of a seed round together, and she wanted you to get on board.
That's right.
And so the seed round, I looked on Crunchbase actually and I couldn't find it. So how big was it? Who was investing? What did that look like?
There was, we have a very unusual fundraising story, and I'm not sure that it's easily replicable. So I'll sort of give it to you in a nutshell. So the seed round was quite a large one. So £1 million or close to £500,000 from.
This was like 17 years ago, right?
Yes. So that was achieved just before the downturn, just before the crash. So we literally banked all of that a couple of months before the market went belly up. I had about 3 weeks of internet boom, and then it went, after I quit my job. So the seed round was quite generous, and that we stretched that for close to 2 years. And then we had an angel round, a significant angel round of about 3 million, which was, and that's very unusual for a company that has, with the trajectory that we had, was our final round. So we grew organically from that point. So we had 2 rounds, and we grew the business to the point of sale acquisition last year.
Okay, great.
Organically.
And so the people who invested in that 500k round and the people who invested in that £3 million round, they were the same people, or you brought
different
new people on?
Different people.
Okay.
So the larger round was led by a highly, and that explains a lot of our history afterwards. It was led by one highly unusual individual called Bela Hadvani and his family, and it's essentially almost like a family office, if you like, who had been very successful. He's an engineer in his own right and done very well in technology, and was actively seeking for high-impact businesses. So he was intent on it being not a foundation, not a charity, not a pseudo business, but a proper business. But he was looking for a high-impact business, and I think it's. I'm sure Forward would support that. It's highly unusual for an angel to put in that sort of amount of money in a business that was still fairly untested at the time. But that was his passion, and that I'm sure that the business would have had a very different trajectory if we had been led by different investors. But
if there were loads of angels around writing those kind of checks, I think we'd have to rethink the way in which we did things, for sure.
Quite.
So in that first couple of years, then. You've outlined a sort of a crisis time, spending 500k over the 2 years, having to be extremely lean. So what did you prove over those 2 years, and how did you do it, and how did you get that next round away?
Yeah, it's really interesting. We were in an incubator, and all other businesses in that incubator were encouraged, even though the markets had completely gone off the boil, as we will all remember. They were really encouraged to keep burning cash in the hope that they would gain traction fast enough, and then hope that they could close a round swiftly afterwards. We took a different view. We thought that not only were the markets really hostile, but our business was highly unusual. There were very few businesses that attempted to do something as overtly social as we socialize in the sense of social mission as us, and it spooked a number of investors. We knew that, so we decided to tighten our belts, not pay ourselves, hire a very, very small team, really be clever about technology procurement. So we didn't build a tech team right off the word go. And we decided that the most cost-effective way of acquiring users would be through charities. So I leveraged my Rolodex and that of my colleagues, and we just basically we wanted to prove good traction through the cheapest possible channel.
What I see from the outside looking in here is that charities are not famous for moving fast, right?
Yep.
And so you've got 2 years to prove quite a lot with a capital constrained environment. So how did you mobilize the charities?
Mobilize is an overstatement.
Mobilish.
It is true that, and I don't think that's particularly an insult, but charities are very difficult to sell into, and even though I came from the charity world and I thought I had valuable contacts, I was taken aback by how incredibly conservative they were, really, and I think for people dedicated to social change, charities can be a very cynical bunch. So we needed to be to work incredibly hard on the few, with the few charities that gave us their trust, and to document and to demonstrate the impact of our product. Luckily, we solved a genuine problem. I think people found even the idea of collecting their sponsorship online, completely refreshing, and we're exceedingly grateful. So we were helped with really.
At the time, there wasn't anyone out there doing this kind of stuff.
There wasn't anyone else out there that did anything like it, and so we essentially put our limited resources on perfecting, might be putting it strongly, but certainly improving the product and making and really demonstrating the impact that it had, and then relentlessly sort of be out there in front of partners and charities and sort of secure their backing.
And if you could point to any one or two moments that really encouraged you to really think of the business, that there's really something here, yes, right? Yes. Were there, is there a particular fundraising that you remember, or something like that, where all of a sudden, there started to be some real massive interest in Just Giving?
Well, what's interesting is that, the product that the company is best known for actually was an afterthought. We tried a number of things before landing on the fundraising page, and perhaps that's the most interesting thing to mention, is that you often become very attached to doing to an application or something, and you become, and I think we are in the business of really loving what we do, so you become incredibly protective of an idea. And the fundraising page, with hindsight, sounds really ridiculous that we didn't really think it would work, but it was an afterthought, and it's by offering it to the organisers of the London Marathon that we really saw that it had enormous potential. And it's there, again, thanking people along the way. It's the people who ran that event who said, yeah, give us a small cut and we'll just put it in front of 40,000 people. And that was the moment where you just thought, okay, so not only are a significant number of people making this product viral, because, every one of these runners put it in front of 30 odd people on average, by email primarily at the time. But everything, we get to demonstrate the value of this product in a geographical area, essentially the Southeast and primarily London, at a particular time. So that was our big break.
And so there must have been a huge amount of personal validation there as well, because every single year, 40,000 people, however many people now, run the marathon. Lots of people, significantly more than that, donate to various different people's causes. And then no doubt you have all of your friends from MCF and people who know you sending you an email going, Marie, this is amazing. I saw your business. This looks really cool. That kind of stuff. So that's the good. Mm-hmm. What's the bad stuff that you remember from that time?
Well, losing the partnership a number of years later I suppose that's not the worst. I'm just trying to think. If your question is what's the worst of that time? The early days, it is I suppose we were a couple of years, maybe 3 years too early in coming to market. The unbelievably charities, which, as I explained, we relied upon for access to consumers, were telling us that the internet would never have an impact on them. I know it's unbelievable to think about that now, but I mean, this morning I was on Twitter and noticing that there are still people in the charity world who have arguments about whether digital is worth investing in. I mean, it's 2017. So it is,
There's probably got little pitch decks out there that they can just, nab from, SlideShare from back in, 1998. Exactly. They can
exactly.
Just, ape and make themselves sound quite nice in a presentation or something
exactly. Like that. So the bad stuff was the patience you needed to gain traction and the sort of and convincing and demonstrating the value of the product, and the other critical moments or difficult moments were when we found out, so we had a partnership with the London Marathon, and we heard literally on the radio that we were no longer welcome, no longer the partner, the official fundraising partner for the London Marathon, that a bank was going to be, Virgin Bank was going to be the primary partner and launching a rival sort of platform. But of course, there's always a silver lining, and it happened to be the making of the business. I think that the competition entering what was a sort of one business sector, a single company category, really was game changing, and we can talk about that if you like.
Well, actually, that's literally the next question, so it's a good time. Lots of people talk about market leading companies having a secret sauce, having the thing that they can do or that they have that no one else has, and that's the reason why they win. So presuming that there definitely was some secret sauce in Just Giving, what was it?
The secret sauce, it's never a single thing. I think it's a combination of a number of factors. I think what made the business very sticky and have a genuine sense of center of gravity was our focus on consumers. So even though I've talked up until now a lot about serving charities, that was absolutely necessary, and our empathy, if you like, and passion for it certainly helped the business and was critical to its growth. But the enduring power of it was that we always, and we never lost sight of the fact that we wanted to create a consumer business. And at times, it led to some difficult conversations, partnership conversations. Sometimes walked away from very valuable and very tempting revenue in order to continue to build a consumer proposition. It was vital to us, and we felt it was absolutely at the core of our mission, that we should, or Just Giving should be the giving app that is recognized by consumers and that has the license to speak to them and to recommend more giving to them. And therefore, a little bit like Amazon, clings like a matter of religious fervor to the idea of owning the relationship with the consumer. That was definitely something that we were at times tempted to abandon or walk away from, but was absolutely central to our success.
Okay, and these are offshoots that the tempting pockets of revenue. Are we talking about B2B licensing revenue here?
Yeah, white labeling, etc. And these were genuine. I'm talking about very genuine opportunities that looked financially very attractive, and that we decided not to pursue.
So, and the reason why was always customer focus.
Absolutely. And when I say customer focused, it was the secret sauce, to return to that question, was to strike that often very delicate balance between the needs of the consumers and the needs of NPOs or charities. And often those needs were at odds with, or there were tensions between the two. And I'm sure if you work for a marketplace company, this will be a very common theme. But if you really do want to, or we felt that if we were to live into our true mission, which is to grow giving by making a better job of connecting people with causes and be an active catalyst in that, then we need to have the right to talk to consumers and to get to know them and to develop a unique intelligence around what they love. And if we sort of if we license our technology and we lose the connection to the consumer, that prize would be lost.
That's fantastic. And so throughout all this, returning to your relationship with Zareen as well, because all of the entrepreneurs in the room, or indeed people who are working for startups, so they're proximate and are affected by founder and co-founder relationships. So I'm presuming that the 18 years hasn't been all super sweet. Mm-hmm. So how's that relationship manifested itself, and what have been the ups and downs, and how have you got over bumps in the road and become stronger as a team?
Yeah, sure. I think the real bumps or the difficulties were when we were learning to work with each other. But I think what really, the people who got to know us as a pair, if I can put it that way, were really struck by how argumentative we were with each other, and the way, certainly what's worked for us is to be really kind of fearless in challenging each other all the time. And it became almost a joke that it was, sort of debate for debate's sake. But we found that because we weren't friends to start with, and we had an intellectual engagement first, and then friendship sort of was added to that, it gave us the license to tear each other apart, or at least our ideas apart. Without too much baggage. But of course, we're now, I mean, as I said before, we're very, very close. And I'd love to do something else with Zareen again, because we kind of share a brain, But what worked for us is to be really, because I think we're tempted to gravitate towards harmony. We think that we need to get on with our co-founders. We need to be friends. We need to, And actually, I'm not so sure that is the key recipe. That might be an outcome. But what makes the relationship work is that you have a common purpose, and you want to succeed at something, and that being in agreement all the time is probably not the right, or probably not leading to you getting the best out of the two of you.
So this idea of what's now sort of fashionably termed creative tension or abrasion. Is that's a sort of real hard goal to get to for a number of relationships, whether they're personal or professional. So how did you keep it clean? How did you not get offended? How did you not take it personally?
That's a good point. Well, don't get offended. Simple. I mean, in a sense, well, no, it's not simple. But if you have a thick skin, or you grow a thick skin, you know that if you know that the intention of the other person is really clean, then you're going to be fine. I mean, my philosophy is always, and Zareen's quite different from that point of view, but I never go home of an evening with a lingering sense that I've left something unsaid. I mean, that's the way I keep sane. So. And often Zareen, who's far more perhaps reserved and more polite than I am, would be kind of, slightly startled that I would take her aside before going home and saying, we need to talk. But we had a clean slate every day, even in the most stressful, the most difficult times, when you fear for the business, you've had crappy days. My philosophy is if you keep the slate clean every day, that tends to work.
So, moving to some more general questions. There's certainly, actually, the school of thought, academic thinking about delivering big, positive social impact is largely centered around the idea that it has to be a viable, going concern, and make money as a business as well as deliver the impact. No doubt that there are other people who think that the cat should be skinned a different way and that it should be not for profit or indeed any other measure along those lines. So I was just wondering where you stand on that issue and whether you got any pushback for taking margin, if you like, from donations, or the way in which Just Giving operated in general.
I mean, the fact that we are unashamedly a for-profit business as well as being for-purpose answers probably your question. But I think what's interesting in the way you frame the question is that often these two completely separate issues are conflated. So the way your business model, charging for a service that's valuable, is one thing. And then you can argue, whether you're a charity, a non-for-profit, or some kind of hybrid, is it fair? Are you charging a fair price for your service? That's one thing. We picked a 5%. Our business model began as being very simple. We charge 5% on donations plus gift aid. And the reason why we did it, we've often been asked, why did you choose that? Was there some science behind your pricing? And it was literally because there was a charity competitor that charged that. The market could take it. We just thought, that seems fair. We'll go for that. And it lasted 18 years. So that's our pricing policy. But anyway, I'm not suggesting you replicate it, but just to answer it, I had, right from the word go. So that's the, I think there's one question, which is the fairness of what you charge. The ultimate purpose of the business or the way it's structured is another. And having worked on both sides of the non-for-profit equation, for a non-for-profit, very successful for many years, that was, by the way, incredibly commercial. So it might be very cuddly from the outside, but MSF operates like a sort of, almost like a VC fund. I mean, it's just incredibly driven and was, aggressive, actually. And then you've got the for-profit world, which we are all familiar with. I, having seen both sides and having seen many, many charities operate, I tend to think that being a business bakes in a sense of discipline, a financial discipline, and a sense of accountability, which, frankly, with a few exceptions, I haven't seen in charities to the same extent. And so I personally think if there's one thing that I'm very proud of from the Just Giving story, beyond the obvious thing, which is that it's raised tons of money, £3.2 billion for good causes, and it's changed the lives of many, many people, and we're very proud of that. But one thing I'm possibly even prouder of is that we've proven that it's possible to do something, to carry out a overtly social mission, overtly for good, and hopefully behave pretty decently doing it, and return some very, very decent returns to shareholders. And I think that's something that's good, and I hope it will inspire other to do similar things.
I think that was the exact word going through my mind. That's hugely, hugely inspirational. I think it's incredibly cool.
Thank you.
So another more general question as well. I was just wondering, with an all-female leadership team, thought that has been a disadvantage or otherwise the past couple of decades, or whether it's not even touched the sides?
I'm almost ashamed to say this, but until this year, I hadn't really thought about it. I am embarrassed to admit this. I was brought up by feminists. It just never occurred to me that I would one day even encounter any disadvantages. But as conversations, the nature of conversations in the business, or between me and the business, has changed since the acquisition by Blackboard. I have come to realize how, and again, I'm rather ashamed to have to admit this, but I hadn't really thought about it until now. When you are something, you are within something, you don't necessarily see it. So running a business with a female co-founder, of course, made us unusual, but we were just busy with the job. But what's changed, what's come to my attention in the last few months, talking to the female members of my team, is how important it was to them that they were led, if you like, by two women, and how it attracted female talent as well as male talent, that perhaps other businesses are more conventional, if you like, from the gender point of view, wouldn't have done. And in a sense, that sort of thinking of advantages, I think that is an advantage if the tech world, as we know, has some issues, and I think a lot of businesses are beginning to address them. But if you don't make your culture really welcoming to women, well, a lot of talented ones will seek proactively great businesses in which to be a woman. And I know that it's been the case at Just Giving. We've attracted some terrific women to work in the business who've stayed possibly longer than they would have done elsewhere, because they were proud to work for a business that was led by women. And you know what? I didn't even know. They mentioned it to me in the last few months, and I was rather touched by that. And so, so being a female-led business gives you that extra competitive advantage, is that you get noticed by talent. And as it's so hard to recruit and so expensive, I think that's a jolly good thing.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering whether the same would be true for Zareen, actually, because in this co-founder relationship, you've outlined perhaps yourself as very confident and an extrovert, and Zareen perhaps as someone not quite so confident and extrovert.
No. I think she would eat you for breakfast. But
Okay, good.
no, she's more private, but she's fierce. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Or maybe
Excellent.
another advantage. You see, this is interesting. I think what I've realised is that often your competitors. I know that from first-hand experience, that people think that women are going to run a business in a gentler way than men, and they're not going to be as competitive and as hardworking, because they think it's a bit of a hobby. And I think that our competitors, I know, because they had the grace to tell us, were really quite surprised by how resilient and prepared to make some tough decisions, and really quite driven we were. So sometimes it's quite useful to be a woman because people underestimate you.
Very good. Fantastic.
Sorry, Matt.
No. I think it's good answers. So moving on to the acquisition. Why sell?
Well, I think there comes a point, having dragged our delightful shareholders for many years through board meetings where we said, no dividends and, no returns for another year ahead, because this is another exciting year of investment. After over 15 years of that, you sort of have to ask the question, or the question begins to crop up in a more serious fashion. But more fundamentally, I think we had an existential choice to make. Clearly this business has what was already global, but it deserved to be more global. I mean, to this day, Just Giving serves primarily the UK market from an NPO perspective. It has users in 165 countries, et cetera, and a very healthy and growing community of end users, consumers. But it needed to, and deserved, in my view, to travel further. And we could do this in a number of ways. We could raise money. We could look at partnerships and where those could lead. The sort of special nature of this business means that I think private equity might have been a bit of a challenge. I mean, those things are not black and white. They are debatable. But it was also very clear that, we'd grown through 18 years of sort of bit of history, if you like, alongside a very well-trusted, incredibly well-run, and incredibly effective organization called Blackboard that served, and we encountered them everywhere, and we had a partnership on, we had an integration with them, and as is often the case with acquisitions, it starts with a partnership, and we knew them very well. Our paths were beginning to converge, and the strategic importance for Blackboard of having a consumer division, if you like, of playing the consumer space was incredibly sort of self-evident. And so the thing that was like became possible.
It's amazing. And so during the Just Giving journey, was there a time at which you thought the business was going to be worth more than you sold it for, or is there is this really an optimum home for Just Giving and exactly the right price, or I'm just interested because a lot of the founders that I talk to, on their mind is where where the exit point is for their business, or indeed them, and no doubt at some point in time they think that they're going to create the £1 billion business, or maybe it's the £100 million business, or the 50, and they're all amazing results, of course. I'm just wondering where this sort of fits in the range of outcomes for you.
Well, in our journey, one thing that I was always told was that the founders are the people who ultimately really know what their business is worth. And Zareen and I always believed it was in the range, of which it was acquired. And I know that at times other investors and other people concerned were might have thought less or more. I mean, this business is so every entrepreneur thinks their business is unique. But I think this one is pretty unique, and therefore, don't test me on the science of how we arrived at the 100 million price tag. But that's what ultimately this business was acquired for.
Yeah. Okay, great. And now that you're integrating or you're part of Blackboard, how are they treating you? Are they being nice?
Extraordinarily nice. I think this is an unusual acquisition for them. I mean, they have a playbook that's well practiced to integrate software companies, SaaS type companies. We are unusual in that we are becoming their sort of consumer division, if you will. And that's pretty new. They're also very conscious of the fact that with that brings a new culture for Blackboard, and they're incredibly respectful of our working practices and our general culture, and almost to the point where I'm waiting for the integration to be more overt, if you see what I mean, between Blackboard and Just Giving. But the team is super excited. It's great to see that people now have a much bigger canvas to consider when they think about their own career progression. I mean, there comes a point where under our own steam, we couldn't offer as many opportunities. So going overnight from on a personal level, if you're a Just Giver, you can now think of your market almost overnight as the world. That's exciting. And our platform is going to become the default offering for consumers across the Blackboard network within the next year, which is super exciting.
Okay, great. And so final question for me before we turn it over to you guys to ask your questions. If you were starting it all again now, what advice would you give yourself?
I find this really quite hard. I think advice becomes obsolete as soon as you utter it. I'll pass. I don't know. I just don't know. Apart from being patient, probably I would say be prepared. It might take some time.
I was about to say, so did you think it was going to be 18 years when you started?
Nope. I thought it might be 7, to be honest.
And at year 7, what were you thinking?
It's too exciting. I want to see the end of it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Anne-Marie, thank you so much.
Thank
You've shared some great insights.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Right, so should we get some questions? Do you need my microphone?
Sorry.
Hi, yeah. You said you didn't raise any funding after your seed and angel rounds. Do you have any... What was the rationale behind that? Was it sort of the independence of the business? Was it the sort of pressure to grow that you might have? And do you have any regrets around that? Do you feel like Just Giving could have been something more impactful had you taken on more funding?
It's a really good question. Yes, with hindsight's always perfect. So if I have one regret, I'm not even sure I can qualify it at that, but there's an argument to be made that we could have had more impact if we had raised money. And probably on balance, if you forced me to have a regret, that would be the one. Having said that, the rationale was that once we turned a profit, and our profits were rapidly quite consequential, we were able to. It gave us a long-term focus, which was incredibly valuable. So we were encouraged by our investors, to think very, very long term, to not be in a hurry. We were in a hurry operationally, obviously, but our orientation was very long term. So we were able to make some very long term bets on a number of things, including data science, before it was even in common parlance. We had a freedom, I think, that we enjoyed. But of course, hindsight's always perfect. And you could say that I can certainly think of a moment in time where having raised more money to expand internationally, probably, or we stood a chance to win a much bigger prize. It's possible.
Hi. How did you go about building a tech team in the early days? How did you make sure that you got the right people on board and they were doing a good job and things like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. We were incredibly lucky in the very early days of finding a tech partner. So we didn't build in-house to start with. And I know of various sort of horror stories around that, and particularly transition from that situation to an in-house team. And luckily, we didn't suffer those woes, but that is, I put it down to luck, to be honest, and exceptional talent in a firm that you guys probably haven't heard of. They're called Quantiv. They were a sort of small boutique software house in Manchester, and I owe them a massive debt of gratitude because they gave us payment terms in our very lean early years that basically allowed us to survive. And the quality of their code meant that we could, a transition to our own platform in a sort of orderly fashion. And then as neither Zareen nor I are engineers, we had to trust our gut and hire incredibly good CTOs. I think we've hired stupendously well. We had an early stage CTO called Richard Atkinson, who's now a sort of board member at Nando's, the sort of chicken empire. But he was he had a massive and incredibly positive impact on our business, and we hired very well from then on. He hired his successor very well, Anthony Drury, who joined us from Expedia. And so generally we had long tenure from great CTOs, which I can only credit our great judgment of character for, because I can't judge their technical ability, but hiring really well was key. And of course, when it came to the development team, we worked incredibly hard at, and that was a real priority for a long, long time, to reduce our cost of hiring. I think the problem is even more acute now than it was a number of years ago. And we had to sort of think very, very, very hard about how we position the business to developers, how we portray our development culture to ensure that we could attract people who not only were attracted by the social mission, but a real sense of opportunity around the tech we were building. And I credit a really brilliant HR guy called Andy Meikle. I think he's with, I've gone to the business now, but he's still in this neighborhood doing great things in HR. And he transformed the economics of our hiring. So really obsessing, even at board level, we would report on how much we'd spent and how much we'd saved on hiring. And we put bonuses against, good developers would get, it was open to anybody, but we paid bonuses to the staff to go and recruit people, etc. So this was a real KPI, lower, increase quality, and lower the cost of hiring.
Thank you.
Evening. We touched on this earlier, but didn't go quite as far as I'd like to hear in terms of profit and mission. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think it's amazing what you've done, and if more models deliver that, the trillions of return-seeking assets will do more social good. But there's a lot of unenlightened thinking out there. I was really interested to hear as to whether you hit any headwinds, journalists giving you a hard time. I've not seen a lot of bad news around that, but I'm sort of slightly surprised about that. I was curious to hear your perspective.
Oh yes, we've well, obviously it's you've missed it because we were in the Daily Mail on a regular basis with extraordinary regularity about how dare we charge, how dare we be a for-profit business, etc. And in fact, one of the most surprising aspects of the Just Giving story is how, having had quite a lot of hostile coverage and commentary, how it didn't hinder our growth. So on the one hand, we would have long threads. I mean, luckily, maybe Daily Mail people don't give, but I mean, I happen to know they do. So they give, they criticize you on the one hand, but they still use the platform on the other. So in a strange way, it taught us a lesson in being thick-skinned. You know, you can get quite a lot of hostile coverage, including some quite personal on, you know, when it came to Zareen and me. And actually your business continues to thrive. So I think that, you know, this whole idea that if your mission, I think it's a very strange mentality that we, to a degree, we all suffer from. We think that if something is good, it's got to be cheap or it's got to be free. I think that's weird. We don't think at all about the fact that, you know, most businesses exist blatantly to enrich their shareholders, and that's okay. But if a business tries to do a good job commercially and make the world a better place, then surely that must be very suspect. Apparently there's behavioral economics that surrounds this, that's well proven. If there's anybody in the room who's thinking of sort of, you know, or who's already founded a business that's ostensibly for good or has a very strong social mission, don't be surprised that as soon as you gain traction, that becomes an area of suspicion. That's one thing. But the second thing is it probably doesn't matter. In fact, it gives you a lot of coverage. I mean, we got almost as much. Our users would come to the rescue, and people had this warm glow of support towards the business when, you know, the Daily Mail were sort of exposing us. So a thick skin is really required.
Yeah, congratulations again. And quick question, during the company life cycle, when did you experience the highest rate of growth, and what can you attribute that to?
Good point. I'm rubbish at dates, famously, so it will be the year when we did something like 7x or 8x on the previous year was, I think, don't hold me to this, but it was the sort of mid-noughties, so 2004, 2005, something like that. And the single most important factor that we attributed that to was we did kind of 6-week complete revamp of the website over the summer. So we kind of killed ourselves, basically, kind of changing everything on the platform. But the single most important thing we did was to free the end user to do whatever they like. So it sounds a bit stupid, but before, the charities had sort of permissions, etc. They had some control over what people did. And it was deeply unpopular with the B2B side of our business, but we decided to put the entire control of the whole experience into the user, and then to give the charities some mitigation power after the event. So that was a real rewrite of the fundamental business logic of the platform. But as you can imagine, and it's obvious, right? I mean, in 2017 or 18, we would give our users complete control over such things. But back then, it was quite controversial, and a lot of our B2B partners were really alarmed by this. The idea that, you know, their supporters should have agency was really controversial. But that was the year that it changed everything.
Thanks. You mentioned before one of the low points was when the London Marathon stopped using you guys as a partner and partnered with Virgin Bank instead. And then you started to talk about how the introduction of Virgin kind of helped make you guys kind of grow and helped you reach where you are today. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So when you begin, I mean, arguably we didn't know, as we were working on the early days of the business, we didn't quite appreciate that we were kind of creating a category, not just creating a business. And it's very awkward to be just one in that sort of category in the mind that people begin to develop. It's really important that people resent that they don't have much more choice. So the entry of well-funded and fairly aggressive competitors, I mean, I won't lie to you, scared me a little bit. But once we got over the surprise and the slight fear, if you like, or sense of trepidation, we just could see that it validated our market. So the fact that there were competitors of that caliber coming into our space made our space become real. It grew the market. More and more people became aware that they could do this stuff online. So we piggybacked almost, if you like, on the marketing spend of our competitors. It helped that their product wasn't very good. I would say that, of course. But it legitimized us as a business. It also, the thing that gave me the greatest amount of fear with is also the thing that made our business successful in the long term. So all our competitors entered with free or very low cost. They competed on price, essentially. And we decided not to compete on price. We decided that, well, we couldn't afford it anyway. But also we thought, actually, as a point of principle, we think that charities deserve the best. And fundraisers and, basically people who want to achieve big things in the world need a great product. And that product needs a commercial engine behind it. And we're not going to compete on price. And we're going to compete on quality and reach and virality. And so not only did our market become legitimized by the entrance of well-funded competitors, but the seniority of people who became the buyers on our B2B side really, we basically began to have strategic relationships with charities and corporates and others. And that gave us a chance to demonstrate the value of a premium product compared to a poorer, in our view, and that's proven undoubtedly right. Because we continue to, even in the London Marathon this day, we are the largest platform by an enormous margin, even though we don't spend a penny in marketing on it. You know what I mean? So that's quite nice. And that's the power of saying, okay, we are a premium product, and we invest in creating an amazing experience that people are proud to be associated with, or you can go a sort of cheaper competitor. So legitimacy and creating the market, it takes more than one company to create a market, and so therefore welcoming competition is a sort of interesting point of view, if you like.
All right, we have time for one or two more.
Thank you. Could you perhaps comment on the pending threat of cryptocurrencies to your market?
I wish I had a meaningful answer to that, but I'll pass. Ask me again in 6 months. I don't have a profound answer to that.
Thank you. All your insights tonight have been inspirational. Just one quick question. You said, the fundamental principle was always to be customer-centric, and you've gathered a lot of data on your customers. Were there any interesting insights that they provided? Any behaviors that you weren't expecting, and what they did and their passions? Because it's pretty heartfelt stuff that you guys deal with, so it's always interesting to know what people are thinking out there.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, one of the surprises of the last few years is definitely what we learned through our sort of data crunching work. We, as I think I hinted at earlier, we decided to create a data science team fairly early on, about 4.5 years ago, nearly 5, because we were, our previous attempts at matching people with causes had been inconclusive or not terribly exciting. And we thought, how come that collaborative filtering, for example, which is very common on other marketplaces, doesn't seem to work here? So, what works on Amazon, that has served Amazon exceptionally well. Why does it not work with giving? And we discovered, we gained an insight, which again, after the event seems incredibly self-evident, but was a real eureka moment for us. That actually giving is not it's not a kind of classic consumption. So the segmentation approach, which is to say, Matt and I are in the same demographic, therefore we'll buy the same product. That holds true for fashion, electronics, and any number of sort of other forms of consumption. In giving, what we discovered is that what was occurring in your network, in your social network, in your family, the trials and tribulations and the tragedies in your network are the things that influence you the most. And of course, as I say that, you must think, of course, it's self-evident. If somebody's father suffers from Alzheimer's, for example, my propensity to give to an Alzheimer's-related cause is heightened. But that requires the giving platform to know that this content is circulating in your network. So that gives you a hint of the investment we needed to make in order to understand the nature of the noise in the conversations that surround people, which trigger the influences that will lead to them wanting to donate again. So in other words, in summary, the normal ways of matching and recommending, so of building recommendation engines, work brilliantly in lots of forms of consumption, but emphatically not in giving. So that was the insight.
And thank you very much for such great questions. And actually, I've just got one more for the audience just before a final thank you. And I'd just like to know how many of you have either run a campaign or given money to a campaign on Just Giving. Hands up. So aside from Facebook, I don't know how many other people that we could get in here with that many hands up for their product. And that is just a phenomenal thing, no doubt, for you to see and for us to be in an audience with you. So thank you very much, Anne-Marie.
Thank you.